Hi, welcome to Blacksmith3D. Today we're launching a new series called Created in Blacksmith3D. I am Dave, otherwise known as Conan, and I'm the developer of Blacksmith3D. And what I'm going to be doing is showing you how to some of the inside processes that I personally do when creating content in Blacksmith3D for programs such as Poser and Daz Studio. And so I'm going to take you through and show you some of the tips and tricks and show you how to develop content for these platforms. Now, let me give you a quick sort of lowdown on the project that we're going to be working on today. This one is an alien morph target, specifically just for the head, and I called it Carney. Here we go. It's KHAARNI, and it's a head morph project. And this particular head morph here, as you can see in the middle, is just how it's applied to the Genesis to default male. But it's specifically designed to not interfere with existing human sort of character morphs. So here we show it mixed in with Mitchell, which is available through our publishing, and this other one is mixed with Sherman. So as you can see, the alien morph doesn't interfere with the facial features of these original sort of human characters, and it kind of makes them look like two different aliens of the same race with their own distinctive features. Okay, so here it's also showing you how the morphs are actually, it's not a complete morph, how it's actually broken down into individual morphs, such as the skull, nose, neck, jaw, ears, so you can sort of reproportion each one as you see fit. So if you want to have a character look a little more human and just with a little bit of the alien features, then you can start toning these down. If you want them to look as much like the alien as possible, then you can crank them up and put a little bit of the nose, put an extra jaw. You get the point, right? So it's not just a single morph target. And okay, here we have the Carney project loaded into Blacksmith3D, and this is based on the Genesis 2 Male by Daz3D, and we have imported a CR2 file. We're not going to get into the topic of importing CR2 files in this video. That's the topic of another video. However, to make a long story short, you can export the CR2 from Daz Studio with the make sure that the base resolution is used, not the high resolution, and the subdivisions are set to 0. So that way you're just getting the base model like this without a lot of little tiny polygons in here. You're just getting the basic model before subdivisions. Okay, so over here under the morphs folder, we have all the individual little morphs that go together to make this character. And now here we have the skull, which is right here, the nose, the neck, which gives these little pits here. A large forehead is actually not in use for this project. That's kind of something I was experimenting with, but I've decided not to go with it. The jaw, right here, the cheeks, which I have. There we go. There they are. By the way, when you double click on a morph, you get its properties, and you can change its strength from 0%, 50%, 100%. When you're editing morphs, it's best just to keep them at 100%, so that way you can be sure what you see is what you get. And these are asymmetry morphs. These basically make the character's face look slightly asymmetric, depending on how much you do. Now, it's a good idea to number one, have asymmetry in your characters, because perfectly symmetrical faces just don't exist in nature, and they always look a little fake. And if you want to go for something a little more realistic, then you definitely want to throw in some asymmetry into there. However, from a technical point of view, it's much easier to do the entire morph character creation as if it was symmetric, and then add a little asymmetry morph on top of it. Now, we'll get a little later into the details of how you can actually do that, but I'm going to first show you that these individual morphs over here, which create the overall character. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, is that I originally made this all as one morph target, and then I split them up into individual morphs, and I'm going to show you how to do this, and it's actually a really powerful technique. However, you may decide that right from the beginning you want to do each morph individually to keep things organized. You can do that, and that's fine. I find, me personally, that I don't always have the correct morph selected that I'm editing. So for example, if I had the jaw here and I'm supposed to be editing the jaw, and then I say, oh, there's a problem up here, and I start morphing this, but I haven't selected, say, the skull morph target, then all those deformations end up going to the jaw, right? Which makes it the whole point of splitting them up, pointless. So, however, if you can be sort of if you can pay attention close enough not to make mistakes like that, you can start off having them all split up. And otherwise, I'm going to show you later how to do one complete morph and split them up. Anyhow, so let's go to the individual morphs here. So first, I'm going to set them all to 0. So if I click on here and I shift click all the way down, this is on Windows. The hotkeys on Mac may be a little bit different. And then while still holding shift, I double click. And now you see here that's multiple selected. And I'm going to set 0 again. Even though it had 0, that was just showing one of the morphs were 0. But when I actually typed in 0, they all went to 0. Now you can see this is the original character before any morphs. Now if I just want to see what the skull morph looks like, and put that to 100%, there it is, right? I take it down and just look at his nose. All right, there it is. The neck. You get the idea, okay? The reason why I split these up is that it makes it easier in either Poser or DAZ Studio to individually tweak those proportions. So if you want to have a little less of this sort of skull morph, and maybe you want to have a bit more of the ears, etc., you can tweak the strengths of the morph targets. Anyhow, I'm going to set these all back to 100% again. And then I'm going to show you how to make these cheek morphs, for example, here. But doing it on the backdrop of having the rest of the character in place so you can see the final result. So I'm going to say, cheeks. Here we go. Double click on cheeks, and I'm going to set this to 0. Okay, now I'm going to create a new one by right clicking on morphs and say create new morph. And I'm going to rename, and I'm going to call this cheeks. Okay. Now you can't use exactly the same name as the morph that's in there, because otherwise you'll get an error. So I'm going to use this rotate view tool here. You notice the point I click on becomes this sort of the center focal point. See, if I go here or go here, this is just that's just a little bit of trivia for you. However, I'm going to click on the cheek here, rotate into view. I'm going to zoom in a bit. Now, I'm going to take, by clicking on the Morph tab, I'm going to click on the bulge chisel. Now, I'm going to show you this. Now, if this strength is 100%, as it is by default, and then I just sort of click and drag in here, see how it acts more like a brush, where, and I'm sort of drawing onto the surface. But with that full strength, right, it kind of comes out really clunky like this, and we don't really want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the strength at 10%, which is typically good for a bulge chisel. And I'm going to kind of trace out that shape of these really sort of abnormally high cheekbones that this alien has here. And notice with the 10%, I have to go over it many times in order to get the sort of effect I'm looking for. All right, here we go. And the trick is, what we're going to do is we're not going to worry too much about making it perfectly smooth around the edges, because I'm going to show you how to do that right after this. And so, with that being said, we're going to overdo it a bit. We're going to essentially make this morph a bit stronger than it really needs to be, and then we're going to tame it down. So I'm going to go here and maybe a little more up in this area. Okay, because we're going to give these really kind of harsh cheekbones. Now, if I click on the unwarp chisel here, and I set the type to absolute, right? I'm not really going to get into the details as what that means right now, but for this case, absolute is the way to go. So with the unwarp chisel, the 10% is a little weak, 100% is a little too strong. I'm going to go for like 30% right now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start off with the edges, and I'm going to start clicking here, and clicking and dragging, and this is kind of like, it's going to smooth out these edges. and it's not quite like like a typical smooth that you'd expect, like in a lot of 3D programs, because what this will do is, instead of just blindly smoothing the vertices, I'm going to show you with the wireframe overlay what I mean. I say, instead of just smoothing this vertex by just calculating the average of the surrounding vertices and kind of moving towards that average point, which could actually make the whole model just look really sort of really overly smooth and sloppy. What this is going to do is it's going to attempt to restore the shape to what its original shape. But given the overall transformation. So here is a really big bulge, and so as I click on it, it's just going to kind of sort of drift back towards its original shape, but while preserving the general large-scale shape of the deformation I made. There we go. And this would be a lot more obvious if this was a really big, like if this morph came out really big like this, and then I was going to unwarp bits of it, it wouldn't just shrink back to here instantly. It would sort of start pulling and getting the same general shape as the original cheek, but while keeping that overall sort of structure of what I just did. Anyhow, that's just a little bit of commentary. So you notice I'm just going to go gently, little bits at a time, unwarp around it until it looks nice and smooth. Now I'm going to hit this O hotkey again. This is how you get the overlay. So you push the O key on your keyboard to toggle that on or off, right? So here we go. And I'm using the F3 key to rotate. And if I push it again, it goes back to the tool that I had before. So you can quickly toggle between rotate and tool. So I can go rotate, hit F3 again, tool, right? I can click, 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 click. I get F3, rotate, and then use the tool. There we go. And it's all right, but that's a little too soft. I'm looking for something a little more extreme. So I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to over-exaggerate it. I'm going to really make these cheeks bulge out, and then when I unwarp it, it's going to just tend to shrink. And then to pretty much this to what I'm looking for. So you overdo it with the bulge, and then unwarp it until it looks just right. See, like if I look at this in the front, that's obviously not pleasing. But then I'm going to start unwarping around the edges here. Little clicks are better. If you go click, 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 right? Or you can drag it as well. As long as you have this strength low, you're good. You don't want to do too much in a single iteration. So and roughly here. And remember, when this is being displayed in either Poser or DAZ Studio, it's generally going to be subdivided. So see this little detail here, right? That's basically just a result of the low resolution base model. When that's subdivided, that'll look a lot smoother. So don't worry too much about nitpicking about those little things there. Because when in doubt, just import it into DAZ Studio and take a little look at how it looks when it's subdivided. Anyway, there it is. That's a little more what I'm looking for here. But you notice I did not have mirror and symmetry turned on here. That was off. So I'm going to solve this by using the selection brush, and I have the hardness set to 100%. So it comes out completely red, which is like full strength. I'm going to select that whole area, hit the S key once or twice just to soften it up. And I'm going to go to the cheeks morph, right click and say make symmetric right to left. And boom, there we notice it's on the other side now. And that's how you do the cheek morphs. Okay, now that we did the cheek morphs, I'm going to show you how to do the ear morphs. These are really quite easy, so won't take too long. So first off, I'm going to do as I did before. I'm going to turn off the existing ear morph, and I'm going to then create a new one. I'm not going to make them exactly the same as the others, but you'll get the idea. Okay, so I created a new morph called ears. Now with this little red bar in front of it, that means that's the currently selected morph, and that's the one we're going to be deforming. And for this, we're going to be using some of the hammer tools. So the hammer tools work in conjunction with the selection, specifically soft selection. So I take a selection brush here, and since I'm going to be going, I want to select everything straight through the model. I don't want any of those hidden surfaces to get omitted. For hidden surface removal, I click none. And so that means when I click in here, right, everything straight through that ear gets selected. Right, notice how that's all sort of brighter. I'm going to show you the hot selection view, what that looks like. So just to reiterate the point, I'm going to Control U to unselect it. And I'm going to say if it was on Smart Culling or Per Vertex, and I was to click here, right, you notice already there's a bit of blue there, which means unselected, right? And if I rotate around the back, all that hidden stuff didn't get selected, right? But in this case, I actually do want to go all the way through it, so I'm going to say none. And I'm going to click on here, and this is how we do the pointy ears. Now, now from here, I'm going to hit the S key a few times. And in case, again, if you're not a hotkey kind of person, you can say Edit, Select, Soften, and do that several times. But it's much easier just to hit the S key. But you notice how a lot of that selection also sort of bled out to here. So I'm going to undo this a few times by Control Z, Control Z, depending on what country you're in. All right, that didn't quite work the way I thought. Anyway, let's go here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold, I believe it's the Alt S key, right? So Alt S, and see it's softening in such a way that it's not growing out, it's only softening in towards the original selection. So that way I'm not going to have it spill up into the side of the forehead here. Now, if in case you're wondering how I quickly change these views, I'm hitting the left arrow key here to see from to view the model from the left side, and the down arrow key is to view it from the front, so you can switch back and forth. Otherwise, you can see up here, you have front and you have left. All right. Okay. So I'm going to take this move hammer, and this is going to do just what you expect. It's going to move the selected vertices. Now the red stuff is the most selected. It's the hottest, however you want to look at it, and that's going to move the most. While it goes down to yellow and green is going to move less, and then the sort of the bluish purple is going to deform the least. So I can stretch this out to about here, and maybe move backwards a bit. No, actually I'm going to do it like this first, and then I'm going to click the rotate hammer. You notice I have tilt as the default direction that's already there. I'm going to click here, and then this is my center of rotation, and I'm going to drag to the left to rotate it back a bit. Okay, there. So now this is kind of the big overall shape, but I want this part to be pointy. So in order to do, since this is kind of at a 45-degree angle, most of the ways our tools work in, like the horizontal or vertical directions. So I'm going to line that up with the viewport. So by clicking Rotate View, and then clicking Tilt, and then clicking in the middle of the ear here, and I'm going to tilt it, rotate it, so the ear is kind of going up and down in the viewport. Okay. And I'm just going to unselect this again just so I don't forget later when I'm trying to do a normal rotation. Now I'm going to take the scale hammer, and this is kind of like we'll scale in 3 directions. So I'm going to remove the depth component, and I'm going to remove the vertical component, that the vertical is up and down, and just scale in the horizontal direction. All right, so I'm going to click in the middle of the ear here, and then I'm going to drag the mouse down. And you notice how it's getting pointy because the stuff here is selected more than down here, and it's kind of giving you this nice sort of transition here, right? And let's put that strength back up to 100% so we don't have to drag so much. And then also, if you don't like the way this is bending here, you can undo that. And you can just say, you can either smooth the selection inwards more with that Alt-S hotkey, as we mentioned here. If you notice as you do it, say softening the current selection, hold Alt to soften inwards. So it's kind of shrinking in like that. So now when I click at the scale and go, it's going to be a little nicer, a little more to what I want. There you go. And I believe the original ear morph I had also did a little something with the lobe, but it's not really all that important. It's just a matter of your own personal preferences to how you want things to look. But let's just do a little comparison just for fun. Okay, let's turn it off, and let's put the original morph on, 100. Yeah, I made his lobe a little straighter. You know, it's there's no point getting into that right now. It's pretty much the same procedure you did with the top, except for you omit this sharpening of the top ear bit. So that's how you do the ear morphs. Alrighty, now that I show you how to do both the cheeks and the ears, they're pretty simple and straightforward. I'm going to give you the basic procedure and how we did the skull morph. Now this one's a little more complicated, and you had to be a little more careful because you're dealing with like very limited geometry up top here. I'm going to show you with pressing the O key for the overlay, wireframe overlay. You can see here there's very few points here, so you got to really selectively morph each one that you want. You just can't blindly sculpt it out. It's just not going to turn out the way you like it. So I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So just like we did with the others, I'm going to turn the existing skull morph off, and I'm going to create a new one just for the purposes of this demonstration. I'm going to rename it skull. And I'm going to quickly show you how I did those initial ridges, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it because we did it's the same bulge chisel that we used before. And I'm going to put that, you know, even just to save a bit of time, I'm going to set that to 20% strength. And what you can do is you can sort of trace out that sort of ridge that you want. So I'm going to go from on the brow here. I'm going to start off like that, and then going along the side of his skull here. Oops, I just noticed, I think I made a mistake. Yes, the hidden surface removal was still set to none. You notice that went all the way through. And we definitely don't want that. So I'm going to go Control Undo, 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 go back to Smart Culling. Now let's do this. Let's again bulge here, start getting this ridge. Now, oh, I also noticed that this large forehead morph, we don't actually want that on there. Okay, here we go. As before mentioned, I'm not actually using that morph on the final project. Oh, and make sure I reselect this new skull morph. And here we go. I'm getting a bit of this brow here first. Now, before I go any further, I can start going around here and just sort of using the bulge chisel, and you can do that. But in this case, since we're dealing with limited geometry, I want to be a little more precise with which vertices are actually getting extruded here. So I'm going to change the size of my selection brush to 5, and I'm going to see this these two rows here that are going around. I'm going to select the vertices on either side, because I'm going to bulge this whole thing out in one fell swoop. Now, as I rotate around, notice this is all selected. And when I add to the selection, I'm going to hold the Shift key, and then I'm going to keep clicking. And notice how it doesn't clear, right? So if I was to not hold the Shift key, all that selection would go away and start the new one, right? But I want to undo that, hold the Shift key, and I'm going to go all the way around. And for some reason, I'm thinking I got the wrong column because this part is a little too fat. I think I wanted this one here. So I'm going to go around here. And I'm going to select all these guys. And I'm going to stop around here. And now from here, I'm going to take, let's try the bulge dent hammer for now. And if I go here and I click and drag in the viewport up, right, you'll notice how it bulges that part upwards. And there's no soft selection here. This is just all these points are being bulged at the same rate. They're all fully selected. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to, like as before mentioned, I'm going to over exaggerate it because I'm going to eventually unwarp it a bit. So here's generally how it looks. Right, so it gives me that kind of ridge around the side, but it's really harsh. Now, here we go. So I'm going to Control U to unselect, and I'm going to start off here with the unwarp tool again, and I'm going to click on this transition area, and I'm going to notice how it's bringing these two parts together. And now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And see, I don't want that to be so harsh. And I'm going to unwarp back here as well. Little clicks, and we're still set at 20% strength. There we go. There we go. Now, there's a little more details like you want to do is like you probably want to pull this whole row closer to there, because it's just going to make it when this subdivides that a little harsher. You can do this in a number of ways. How do we want to do it? I'm going to, let's just do it the same way we did that one. I'm going to select just a single row of vertices now. Let's get rid of that one. And I'm going to go around here. And I'm going to show you something here. Like, just say I accidentally go and I select that. Right? I'm like, oh no, now I have to do it again. Just finish doing it here. All right? And hold the Alt key and then click on that vertex, and that'll remove that part from the selection without clearing the rest. Just kind of like the Shift key was used to add to the selection. So I'm going to go here. You know what? This is not going to work if I do it all at once. So I'm going to Alt key and remove this bit here. Now I'm going to click it from the left. View it from the left by clicking the left arrow key. And same as here. And now I'm going to take the move hammer, and I'm going to, here we go. And I'm going to move it up really, I'm going to over exaggerate it, move it really close up there. Don't worry about this sort of deformed bit over here. We'll clean that up with the unwarp tool. Now here, I'm just going to select these points again. And now I'm going to move them over here as close as we can. Okay, and I just want to fix this one by bringing it a little more center. Okay, now, if we're going to look at it from over here, you know what? This is a good example of making sure that you are thinking in 3D and not in 2D. You can see this, I want it to be more in there. So I'm going to undo these last few steps. It's right back to this point here. Now we notice here, I want that to be in. I want that to get a bit of a crevice. So I'm going to view it from the front, and then I'm going to pull that whole selection in where it's like this. All right, you see now, you can see that purple shading showing up. That's showing that sort of concave region. That's what we're looking for, something a little more like that. And again, the final result is going to be so harsh because we're going to unwarp. With that being said, let's over exaggerate that a bit. So when we unwarp, we'll kind of meet it somewhere in the middle. So let's go back to over here and select this sort of row of vertices again. And from the left point of view, we're going to pull it over here. And from the front, or the back might make more sense here. If you push the up arrow, that sets the viewport to back. I'm going to pull it in with the move tool. Okay, there we go. Now let's go back to the left. Okay, looking a little sloppy, but that's where a magic unwarper tool comes in. Now here's the trick. Before you start unwarping this, which is just going to pull it back to where it was, right, and then kind of defeat the point of what you're doing, you take all these other points around here and you start unwarping those. And notice that'll pull it nice and even towards this crevice that you made. So that way when you unwarp this bit, it doesn't come out too much. Right? And this is a way of kind of automatically spreading these polygons in a nice uniform way towards that ridge. Right? And I want to avoid the ear here, so I'm going to just do it from an angle. And you know what? Let's get that strength up to 100%. It's taking too long. There we go. And it's at some point with the unwarper tool, it just stops moving because that's when it says, okay, that's about as far as I can go. While just sort of maintaining the unwarping procedure. Okay, here we go. Let's do this a bit more. You notice how each point is sort of interdependent on the other. So if that's unwarped, then I go back to that. Let's undo a few steps here. So let's see, this point is not moving much anymore, But once I unwarp these ones and then I go back over here, it kind of comes out again. See that? Anyway, so now we're going to do, that we've done that unwarping, we'll do a little bit of gentle unwarping over here. So let's bring that strength back down to 20%. This is the worst part, so let's start that part first. Little click. Remember, little clicks are better than big clicks. And that one came out a bit too much. And that looks fine. I'm going to do a little dun, 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 dun. There we go. And at the same time, I'm going to do a bit on the ridge itself. Just a little. All right. There we go. And there's an now this part here, we want that to eventually blend right back into the skull, so we can do more unwarping as we get that far down. Alrighty. There we go. Now at this point you can say, well, I want this to I want that groove to go in a little deep again. I can hit the bulge tool, for example, and I can hold the Alt key so it goes inwards instead of outward. And then I can start clicking in there. And that's going to carve that detail right in. Again, notice the purple showing up in the concave shading. That's showing that it's going deeper in. And then again, take the unwarper tool with let's make that 10%. Few little clicks here. Few little there. And let's bring it back around again. See that? Now we can do the exact same thing on the other side here. I won't get into too much detail. But then you kind of create this ridge, and that's the sort of thing we're looking for. And again, let's compare what we just did here with the final morph. So I'm going to put that to 0. And I'm going to say skull 100%. And you notice here, it's actually, I kind of over-exaggerated that sort of ridge on this new one, which is fine too. Here it's actually not, it's not as tight as we just showed you, but that's fine. You can do it any way you like, whatever looks good. And then so we have this ridge here, and then we have a few other ridges in here, and then we have this sort of spiny area in the middle. So let's start moving towards that. So let's set this back to 0, and I'm going to set this one to 100%. And for this, for that second set of sort of the spiny ridge that goes right here, let's take a look at it again. Right, that one right there. Okay. I'm going to just start off with just using the bulge chisel. In the interest of saving time, we're not going to have to be too precise about it. Make sure the skull, this is the morph we actually want to be adjusting here. Make sure that's selected, and I'm going to go up and down here. I think it might be another row off than I did with the original, but you know what, that's okay. We don't want to be perfectionist here. I'm just showing you the general procedure. All right, and this one is going to go up here, and we're just going to kind of have it fade to nothing about there on the top. All right, and to sort of how'd you say, really accentuate these details, what we're going to do is I'm going to select this row here, and I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to pull it really close to over there. This is more like what we saw in the original. And then I'm going to clear the selection with Control U. I'm going to go back and tidy up that point with the unwarper chisel. And let's see, look at there. And you notice how we did it, it kind of makes it a little more less smooth, a little more harsh. So with that being said, to make things sharper, there's another tool here called on the touch-up chisel. If we choose the type sharpen, right, and then we start clicking on here, it's going to actually accentuate the sharpness of these details and make that look a little. Because notice here, it's pulling towards. It's kind of like an anti-smooth. It's pulling these bits together and making that ridge sharper. That's actually really nice. like that. We can do that over on this side too. On this side, it's actually tending to pull it towards there, so it's not really giving the effect I want. But let's go on the, yeah, see if we do it on top of the ridge there. So notice how it pulled that ridge together and made it sharper. Let's do that again. See that? There we go. And then that's really nice. That's more consistent with the original. So that sharpening tool. This is a, if you want a Blacksmith3D secret, the sharpen type of the chisel, it really helps to get some like really sharp, distinguished features onto your characters. And so, boom, boom, boom. There we go. So there's these two ridges. And again, this whole time we've been working without symmetry. I'm going to use the picker tool. I'm going to select the element, and I'm going to select all of that. And then on here, I'm going to say right to left. The reason why I'm not selecting everything and doing the symmetry operation is sometimes, like I can't remember on this character now, but sometimes the internal things like the teeth right around the center line might not be perfectly symmetrical or in a way that Blacksmith3D likes. So if you do a symmetry operation on that part, you might get some weird artifacts, and then you won't notice it until later. So that's why I'm kind of deliberately doing this make symmetric right to left on areas that I know are symmetric, that Blacksmith3D will treat properly. So anyway, there it is. So this middle thing, it's just going to take a little bit more work to get exactly the same result I got, but I'm going to show you the basic idea, right? So because there was those really sharp ridges, you're basically selecting little bits out at a time. And so this, I'm going to do that one vertex, for example, here. And I go out, and then I'm going to take the move hammer, and it's going to go sort of up and over like this, right? And then I'm going to over-exaggerate it, because once you subdivide that in either Poser or Daz Studio, it's going to look more smooth, right? And so I can go in and do, you have to do a little trial and error to figure out exactly how many vertices you should go up before you do the next one. But I'm just right now just going to take a shot in the dark and go to the, so there's, okay, one, and then up to the next one. So I'm skipping a row, and then moving up, and then I'm pulling this way over exaggerated like this. Right, there it is. And I'm going to do one more, and you can get the general idea for going all the way up. And I'm going to say here, move. Okay, now this case, you notice how you kind of we want to pull this one down so that the result is going to be much sharper. So I'm going to select this vertex, go back to the side view, and I'm going to pull it down towards, actually there's more than one vertex there. I see. Okay, so I'm going to select that one, and before I keep going, let's put that symmetry back on. Now we have used symmetry on, so we don't have to worry about manually adjusting the symmetry every so often. So let's pull this all the way down like this. Let's over exaggerate it. Let's pull that right down. Okay, there we go. So you get the idea. So that's how those sort of spiny parts come out. And I probably should have one more towards the base here. And left. Gonna move it out and up. Okay. We're definitely not done with that, because there's a lot more sort of things to consider. But if you look at the original again, on this skull, there's now what you're seeing here is a double result. I'm not going to bother turning that off right now, but you see each in here. There's this. We also have these kind of these sort of ridges going in a U shape as well, like at the top of each one of these spikes. So we want to do something like that again over here. So here we go. Let's go to the front point of view, and let's pull this sort of row of vertices, and we're going to move them down. Whoops, let's get that proper morph here, skull. This is the new one we're making. Pull that down, and then with the we can say with depth, we can click and drag. If you pull the mouse down, it's going to go inwards. Let's see how that's turning purple, is becoming concave. So I'm actually, it's hard to tell when you're looking at it in 2D, but that's why we have these concentric boxes going, so you can sort of see the motion. And so it's going away from you at this point. So, or you can look at it from the side. See how it's gone in? And then from here, we can also then turn depth back off. So we have this move horizontal left and right like that. And there we go. And because that's just going straight across, it's a little boring. So we're going to take these middle two vertices and we're going to pull them down here, and that's going to give us more of a U shape. You know, and sometimes you can just hit the S key to soften it, and then that way you're getting everything around it's moving a little bit too. There we go. So you can repeat that procedure up here as well. So let's move that down, move it right down, move it in a little bit, and then select this row here, soften it, and move it down. Whoops, no. Remove the depth, so it's just horizontal and vertical. Move that down again, etc. See, so now how you're getting these ridges. Now, again, there's a little more detail as far as the way these things come. Here, let me show you. Turn this one off again. Again, I can't show you every little step because it takes many hours to do something like this. It's very kind of a creative process where you're, you know, saying, oh, this part doesn't look quite right. You just sort of move it up a bit, but you see how I kind of got this. It all kind of slopes up into there, and I got this middle sort of row of these two, I guess, columns, however you want to look at it, of vertices really close and tight together. So when that subdivides, that gives you really kind of a sharp ridge. If otherwise, if it's these parts are too far apart, then it'll just kind of look really smooth, right? So I want it to look sharp. So anyway, that's generally what you see. You make these horizontal ridges going in there, and that gives that sort of that texture. And then we have this part is nice, really tight and sharp. And towards the top, they just kind of get big and more sparse and a little less, you know, and they just kind of fade out over here, right? So by the time you get to the back of the neck, it's, you know, the morph is kind of over. So there it is. That's probably the most complicated part of this entire morph, is that forehead ridge. And I redid it several times over and kept rejigging it. So, you know, if to get something like that when you're dealing with, when you have only a small amount of geometry to work with, you'll find yourself tweaking a lot and getting it look just right. Anyhow, there it is. Now, what else can I show you before we finish off this video? The jawline is pretty simple. It's just, you know, a bit of a bulging around here. But okay, I'm going to go back to this one tool here, this sharpen tool. I really want to show you what this is like as far as how it can really sort of punch up the details and make it look really characterized. I don't know if you notice, a lot of characters look really smooth in the face. You know, they're they're just kind of really safe, and there's not a lot of sharp edges, and that's fine. But everybody kind of looks the same with that. And if you want to really have some distinguishing characteristics, some really sharp angles are really nice. So anyway, using this touch-up chisel, I'm just going to do this on the annealed morph. So, but I'm going to do it across the board. So I'm not going to worry about which morph is which right now. So I'm going to go here on the cheekbones, for example. Actually, that has to be, I'll go here. There we go. Now I'm going to go on the cheekbones, and I'm going to start sharpening that. See, I don't know if you notice this, how sharp that got right away. I'm going to just put the wireframe back on just so you can really see what's happening. And I'm going to zoom in. And I'm going to go here, and let's even punch up that strength to 30% just so you can see it. Now look at that cheek. Look how like those vertices get pulled together, right? Now sometimes toggling the wireframe is really important, because a lot of times the wireframe will mask what it is you're trying to see, like the shading. Like you might not be so obvious how sharp that is, but then when you turn it off, you're like, oh, that's a pretty sharp sort of fall off between this area and that area, right? And you can go here and just say the nose, you can start sharpening. And like, look how these edges just kind of show up, right? And so you can go around here and really, like the brow, you can kind of, it gives it a really characterized style. And you can kind of do as much or little of this as you want to really kind of, to pull out those details. And so what I usually do is I do a pass where I go through and I sharpen the heck out of it like this. So it becomes very much like a chiseled sort of sculpture, right? Where these are all done really faceted, like, you know, a lot of facets and flat edges. And let me just do a few more here. Do these ridges nice and sharp. Look at that. And then what you can do is, once you've really sharpened it, right? See that? Then you can go back to your unwarp chisel and just unwarp it enough, right? So it looks nice and clean. So let's even do that at 10%. So we can just start little clicks here and start bringing it back again and just stop unwarping when it kind of looks just the way you like it. And even that, because there's so few polygons up here, a little bit unwarping is going to mean a lot. So there we go. Let's put this on like 5% and just click, click, little clicks. Little clicks. Work out the rough areas. There we go. So generally when I'm refining my overall morph, I do this. I'll sharpen it, and then I'll essentially unwarp it, which is like smoothing, but before I mentioned it's better than smoothing. And then I'll maybe go back to sharpen a bit. And one last thing you can do is also, it's similar to sharpening, is where you say flatten, right? It'll just it'll locally flatten areas. So I can go like this and click, and it'll just kind of, that whole area just kind of get flattened out. Again, different from smoothing, different from unwarping. It'll just make that area locally flat. And if you do flattening on, to say on this part I'm going to flatten, and underneath here I'm going to flatten. So essentially if you flatten all around these edges, it's similar to clicking and sharpening them, because this part's going to be flat, that's flat, and that's flat, and the results in this, you're going to have a harsher edge in the middle between them. So these are all some little techniques, tricks you can do to really kind of punch up and sharpen those details, right? And then, you see, if you had to try to do this manually just by individually adjusting vertices and getting that ridge that sharp, it'd be extremely difficult, right? But by using this combination of tools, you can really sort of sharpen out those details and then subsequently re-softening them, right? However you see fit. Let's bring the strength back up again. And then there we go. Yeah. Perfect. Now, I think that's all I'm going to say about that topic for now, because there's only so much quote-unquote art you can teach, but there are technical techniques that you can, technical techniques, sounds funny. Anyway, there are techniques you can learn that aren't artistic, and they're more mechanical. And these are mechanical tools, but when used properly, give you an artistic result. So I'm not going to show you exactly what to do in every situation, but if you use those tools in this way, you can get some pleasing results. Okay, now we're going to show you how to to create a single morph and then break it down into its individual components. All right, so as we see here, these are all individually broke down. So first I'm going to delete that guy. And in this case, the asymmetry morphs, I'm going to leave those alone because they already span the kind of the whole face. They are already sort of separate. But these guys here, I'm going to recombine them into a single morph. So I right click on after selecting them and say spawn. All right, and that basically takes them in the state they're in right now. It recombines them all and puts them into a single morph. So I'm just going to leave that named as it is. And I'm going to then delete the originals. If you're deleting the originals, make sure you saved a backup project first, because there's no going back. Now, but the thing is, when you spawn a morph, it starts off at 0%. So that way you're not getting, before I deleted those, you don't want to have a double morph happening. So, but now that I deleted them, I can say, set this strength to 100%. Now this is in the state like how I originally did it, where I morphed the whole thing at once, right? And so what we're going to do here is say, okay, you morphed it all one. Now you're going to say, I want just a nose morph, just a forehead morph, etc., etc., etc. I won't do every single one for you now, but I'm going to show you the procedure. So just say right now, I just want the nose morph separate. All right, so what I'm going to do is from the side here, I have none selected, so I want to go straight through. Say 10%, and let's just sort of select the whole region of the nose that you want to be included in the actual nose morph. Because at the end of the day, you know, it's just all one big geometry. It's just we're logically saying this part is the nose. The software can't tell you that this is the nose. You have to select which part to say, okay, that's the nose. And to make things a little more clear, I'm going to put in a hot selection view so we can see. Now this whole area is going to be considered the nose, and this is where it's going to fall off here, right? So now what we're going to do is I'm going to, number one, yes, I'm going to create a new morph, and it's going to be, I'm going to spawn this morph. I'm going to spawn the spawned morph. So to make that a little more clear, I'm going to call this whole head. Because if we have spawn morphs and spawn morphs, it's going to get confusing. So I'm going to spawn this. Now this is a duplicate of that now, all right? And I'm going to rename this nose. Okay, but right now, as before, this strength is set to 0 right now. You're not seeing its effect. If I put this on, you're going to see a double morph because they're both perfectly the same, right? So I'm going to first go back to whole head, and I'm going to unmorph the nose as it is here. So I'm going to say the touch up hammer, and I click on unmorph. And this, make sure the strength is 100%. And I'm going to click and drag anywhere in the viewport. It doesn't matter. I'm going to look down here. And then as I drag, see the amount? I want that to go to 100%, not over 100%, to exactly 100%. There we go. Right? So now I just unmorphed the nose from the whole head with a smooth fall off area. So it's not clunky there, right? Now, but I think keep this selection. Don't unselect at this point. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say edit, select, invert, right? Now this is going to select everything but the nose, right? With that certain same fall off area, only inverted again. So now I click on nose and I click on 100%. And now everything's double exaggerated except for the nose, because the nose morph only exists here and it doesn't exist here because we just unmorphed it. But now in the nose morph, let's go back here. I'm going to unmorph everything but the nose. So then again, click in here and drag it up to 100%. See, if I go overboard, if I go beyond 100%, this area in here keeps unmorphing, and then it's not going to give me that perfect transition that I'm looking for, because I want the result to be, when I add the two morphs together, to be exactly the same as the original. All right, there we go. Now I did it. So I can Control U. Now I have two morphs. I have the whole head, which is everything but the nose, and then I have the nose. See, so now if I just want to turn off the nose, I can go to 0, and now this is the default nose of the base model, and 100. I'm going to do one more just for clarity, and then you can do the rest. You can imagine how to do the rest. Okay, now we're going to separate one more sort of submorph from this whole head morph which we created, and we're going to do the ears. So we already did the nose, we're going to do the ears, and then you can kind of follow that same procedure to separate everything else: the cheeks, the jaw, the skull, what have you. Okay, so first of all, we're going to have hidden surface removal set to none, because I want to go straight through the model over here, specifically because there is a lot of that internal geometry with the ear canal and what have you. And let's make sure that the symmetry is turned on, and then take the selection brush, and I'm going to select right around that ear canal. And from this point, I'm going to make sure hot selection view is turned on. It'll make it so make it easier to see. And I'm also going to put the wireframe overlay, because there's not too many polygons here, And so if we just blindly soften the selection, it's going to kind of go off over here. And we want this to be a part of the skull morph, not a part of the ear morph. So we're going to be really careful in which vertices we include in this selection. So I think this is going to be the outer row in which we want, or sort of loop of vertices. And let's do one more here. Oh, and that one point down here. There we go. So we notice here we kind of have this sort of loop going on here. And we're going to do a single soften, which should bring the selection up to here. And that would be the last selected area. And that is still a little too close to the skull than we like. So let's reduce this down. Or, likewise, let's just hold Alt-S and soften inward. So you notice how it didn't spread out? Because we held Alt, it spread inwards. And we're going to do that one more time. And this is going to be the sort of region that gets separated into the ear morph. So from here, we're going to follow that same idea, where we're going to take the whole head, and we're going to now, first of all, we're going to spawn. Okay, now this is everything sort of copied over, and if we set that to 100, as we did before, we'll notice we'll have a double morph, but we don't want to do that just yet. So on the whole head is selected, right? We're going to unmorph the ear. So here we click, and if you notice down in the viewport down here, the amount is going to be, we want it to be exactly 100%. Not more, not less. There we go. Now let's go back to the spawn morph and rename this ears. And make sure that's selected here now with the red, which it is. And we're going to invert the selection. And make sure ears are set to 100%. Now we're going to, in this morph, we're going to unmorph everything but the ears, because we inverted the selection. Again, we unmorph to exactly 100%. And there we go. Now we have further separated out the ear morph. So now if we turn off the ears, you know, the rest of the morph is there except for the ears. And just to drive the point home, let's turn the nose off as well. So let's see, so you can see it. And so we just follow this procedure and separate all the sort of individual morph components that we want until there's nothing left. And at the very end, once you've removed them all, you'll find that there's a little bit of artifacts left over, or maybe around the boundaries in which you did the initial selection. And it's usually good just to discard that last morph. So when this whole head has hardly anything left in it except for a few artifacts, you can safely delete that. Or first test it obviously by setting it to 0 and turn everything else on and make sure it looks good. And then if you're happy with the result, then you can delete that as well. And that is how you cut out the individual morphs, giving that sort of soft transition area so they can easily be mixed and matched and have the relative proportions tweaked. Okay, now we're going to show you how to take these individual morphs and export them to DAZ Studio and apply them to the Genesis 2 mail, and then save those to as DSFs to a particular runtime. This is the same procedure you're going to want to use if you're creating content for Poser. It's just you first do it through DAZ Studio, and then you create a Poser companion files. So anyhow, let's get started. So first I'm going to multi-select all these morphs by clicking the first, holding Shift, clicking the last, and then I'm going to double click while still holding Shift, and I'm going to set the strength to 0, so they're all set to 0. And now I'm going to do them individually one at a time. So if I set this one to 100, right, and then I'm going to export it as an OBJ file. And I'm going to call it the same name. Uh, 01, and I'm going to say save. And I'm going to Now we turn that one back off and do the next one and export. And use this 02. There we go. Set it back to 0. The cheeks. Export. And just follow that procedure until you've exported all of the morph targets that you from here as OBJ files. Okay, now we're here inside DAZ Studio, and we're going to load the Genesis 2 base mail, and then we're going to import the morph targets. Let me try that one more time. There we go. We're going to apply the morph targets to the base mail and then save those into our assets directory as DSF files. Now, first off, we're going to say edit figure morph loader advanced. We're going to uncheck the single file because we want to do a whole bunch at the same time. Choose the files and do a multi-select, and I'm going to omit this one here. One thing to notice, I added a B to the end of each one of these files. I did this in between video takes. Now, the reason is that if you already have a morph target loaded with the same file name as I do with these, because I've previously saved them to a runtime, then you'll basically, they won't load. It won't give you an error. They'll just appears like they're all loading, and you go over to the parameter section, and basically the old morphs that were there are still going to be there, and these ones will just kind of vanish. So it's just a little thing to look out for. So make sure that you're not using duplicate names, and then so that's why I added the B for this case. So I'm going to say open, and I go back to general, and now for a path I'm going to say /morphs /testing and /. This is important to put the second one. If you don't put the second slash, then this entire subgroup here is going to get ignored. And for the geometry scale, I'm going to put poser 1 unit equals 8 feet, and that's because I originally imported Genesis 2 base mail into Blacksmith3D from a CR2 file, which uses poser units. If you originally loaded a DUF file or an OBJ file that was exported directly from DAZ Studio, then you're going to want to use DAZ Studio's own unit system over here. Unit equals 1 centimeter. However, we're using the poser units. So I'm going to say accept, and then we notice that they're loading. And over here you notice the testing group has showed up. And there we go. We click on the testing, and here are all the new morph targets. Now at this point, you may want to tweak some of the parameters, like by clicking on this gear and say parameter settings. And what I generally like to do is I like to say use limits, and I like to make it between 0 and 100%. And depending on the nature of the morph, you may want to make it auto follow. This will make performing clothing and stuff like that kind of follow the morph target. So if you had a hat or hair, and then this sort of symmetry morph sort of, changes the shape of a skull, then ideally it will adjust those things accordingly as well. And unless this is not checked, because if this is not checked, then any kind of conforming sort of clothing, what have you, will ignore the morph. So I'm going to make sure that's checked for these ones. Accept. And you can do the same for all these morphs. Some of them you might not want to bother auto following, like the nose, for example. Like you probably don't need to add the auto follow to that. But the skull you may want to, because it changes the kind of the shape of the top of his head here. So anyway, you can just go through and set those as you see fit. Now we're going to take these, first off, test them, make sure they work. So I'm going to sort of slide this slider up and down here, making sure that works. Okay, good. Now if I had got the scale wrong, if I used DAZ Studio units in this case, then the whole object would either shrink really small or expand really large. Can't remember which one's which when you tweak any of these morphs, because the entire OBJ file would be either completely small, a lot smaller, or a lot bigger. So that's a way of picking up that error, is to immediately tweak these morphs and make sure that the scale is proper. So anyhow, there we go. So after you set all those little individual parameters, you can say File, Save As, Support Asset, Morph Asset. Then notice the asset directory here. This is going to be your base directory, your runtime, or what have you. And I'm going to choose a special one that I made just for this project. See, it's called Carney G2M, right? And the vendor name, that's the name that you're going to be selling under. Assume you're selling, or what have you. That's your handle, your whatever you see fit. And the product name, I'm going to say testing for now, because I had already used Carney as a product name. So, and now what I'm going to do is expand out Genesis 2 Mail, expand out morphs, and to see where testing is, I'm going to just check this box and choose all those morphs in there. And I personally like to keep compress file unchecked, so that way I can go and inspect the file in a text editor, see if I need to make any little tweaks or changes. But that's just me. You can either compress it or not, depending on how you see fit. And I'm going to click accept. And at this point, now it's saving out those morphs to DSF files. So now to drive this point home, if I say new, and I would not like to save it, and I re-import, now this is a fresh project, right? And now if I import the Genesis 2 base mail, and you'll notice this testing folder shows up again, right? Like as if and then all the morphs are in there as we saved them out before, because now they exist in this sort of this base directory, this asset directory here that I just saved them to, right? So so that is how you take the sort of morphs from Blacksmith3D, import them into DAZ Studio, and then save them to an asset directory. And as one final step, I'm just going to show you is that now if you want to make these go to Poser, right? Well, first off, you have to set up a you have to set up your libraries, your presets here. Now, this is, I'm not going to get into the details of doing this right now, right? But anyway, this is like, these are basically just shaping presets that have the morph values set. So when I say, when I use the one for head, they it turns on, let me see this to get the original ones here. See, it turns on them all to 100% except for only one of the symmetry ones is set to 0. And then the off turns them back off again. All right, so then what you can do is you can multi-select these. If you click on this little box and you say create Poser companion files, then you make sure you choose the runtime that you want to save it to, and then you have you leave this alone. Sometimes it gets confused. It doesn't know what file types are supposed to be. So if you use this a library and file extension and you make that as pose, then it'll definitely make them poses. Then you can create a sort of subpath. So in your runtime, it'll be under library / pose / whatever here. And this is DZON conversions as the default. And then if you click accept, it'll create these sort of elements in your Poser library as well. And if you don't do this, right, and you just did the previous procedure of importing the objects and save the DSFs, these parameters will still show up in Poser. So in there, if you go and you under the parameter section for the whole body, not just the head, so don't click on the head, make sure the whole body's selected. You're going to find parameters, you're going to find morphs, and you're going to find whatever subgroup you put it into, and then those morphs will show up and you can just slide them over. So this is just kind of a convenience, but all the morphs are still going to show up over there. All right, so this concludes a video tutorial on how to make an alien head morph in Blacksmith3D for DAZ Studio and Poser. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more like it, then there's something you can do to help out. We're trying something new here at Blacksmith3D, and that is to have myself, the developer of Blacksmith3D, create full projects like this one and offer in the content for sale at Renderosity under the R Publishing banner. Doing this achieves several goals. Number one is by becoming a serious user of the software myself, I'm better at understand what improvements need to be made, what new features are required, and how to integrate smoothly with third-party applications like Data Studio, Poser, etc. Right? Second is the revenue generated from the sale of the content can go towards Blacksmith3D development, so we have the budget to make the improvements identified in point number one. Right? And finally, number three, we can produce in-depth videos such as this one to show everyone else how it's done. Right? So if you like this video and you like to see more Blacksmith3D development, you can show your support by purchasing the item showcased in this tutorial and other items that have the Created in Blacksmith3D logo. We thank you for your support over the years and hope to produce many more in-depth tutorials. Thank you for watching. Peace and love.